What we have here is a list of orders, and there's more than 2,000 rows in this spreadsheet, 2,156. And right now it looks like it's sorted by the order number. But at times we don't want to look at 2,000 rows. We want to look at a summary of the data that we have before us. And we might want to see it summarized by the salesperson or maybe by the customer we sold it to. Maybe we want it by the product name that we sold. Maybe we want it summarized by the month that the item was ordered. I mean, all kinds of different ways we might want to see this summarized, and pivot tables are the way to do that. Before I get into pivot tables, let me show you the subtotal feature, which is up here on the Data tab. For example, if we wanted to see the total purchased by, or let's see, sold by each salesperson, we could sort this by the salesperson. And this will take just a second to sort. And I always find it better to sort using the whole row for every record, because then you don't end up screwing up your data. So now I've sorted this by each salesperson, and there's an easy way then we can add subtotals to this table by saying at each change in the salesperson, add up the extended price. And we could add up other things too, or we don't even need to use sum. You could use any of these other functions as well. But we're going to add up the extended price to see how much did each customer order. And so if we click OK, this will take just a second, and now you can see, okay, Andrew Fuller. And now it bumped it off the screen a little, so let me reduce this. Andrew Fuller, if we go down to the end of that salesperson, we'll see a subtotal here that it put in, sold $177,749.26, and then Ann Dodsworth, and we can go look at that. She sold $82,964. It puts these grouping things in over here on the left side so that we could collapse everything. And if you click the 2, it'll show just the salespeople, just the subtotals, and then clicking the 3 will show all the data again. And so at times that might be all you need if you just want to summarize based on one field. But that's not real powerful, and I find that I don't use that actually very often. And so to remove the subtotals, we can try this remove all. And sometimes that can lock up, I've actually found. So instead of using these subtotals, let's use a pivot table. And to use a pivot table, 2 ways you can do it. If your data is all contiguous, meaning there's no blank lines in it, you can just put your cell anywhere in the table like this and go up on the insert menu and click pivot table. If you want to be as safe as possible, you can select the entire range and click on pivot table. It would have worked in either case on this one, but I find it better to select the entire range. Click OK to put it on its own sheet. Seldom do I want it on the same sheet as my data. And you'll be presented with a screen like this. This looks different if you're using Excel 2003 or earlier. A little bit different format. All of your work for a pivot table is going to happen over here on the right side of the screen. And so let's say we know that we want to add up the extended price. So we'll put that down here in this sigma area. And then if we format that now, I believe it'll keep the formats. So the total of all of our orders was 1,353,983.99. We can verify that by going back over to the other worksheet and clicking on the column, and you see the total down here at the bottom of the screen. So that's the total of everything in our worksheet. Now if we want to do what we did before, where we summarize it by salesperson, we will drag the salesperson here where it says row labels, and now we've got a summary by each salesperson. So these totals look familiar to you there. If we want to use what's called a report filter, we could put that up at the top here, and then what that does is if we select any country, it's only going to display sales to that country. Okay, if we want to select multiple countries, we can say select multiple items, and then we can check multiple boxes. So that's what the report filter does. The report filter allows us to filter items for the entire report. We can also use a filter on the row labels. So maybe we only want to see a couple salespeople. Okay, and then it filters out the other salespeople. But here's where the power of pivot tables really comes in is, let's say that we want the product name below the salesperson. Okay, so Andrew Fuller sold so much of each of these things, and we can do things like sort these things so that the item that he sold the most of is at the top, and then if you go down to Ann Dodsworth, the item that she sold the most of is at the top of her column. We can switch the order of these so that we've got the product name first and then the salesperson. Okay, again, let's sort it by the salesperson that had the most. You see how that works, so we can see who sold each product. We could put the salesperson as a column label so that the dollars appear now up here, or across, and then the salespeople appear across the top row. And then a grand total over here. One of the coolest things I think is that let's say that let's just do it back by salesperson again here. We'll drag that out of here. We'll put salesperson back over here. Let's say that we want to see how much each salesperson sold each month. Okay, well, we can put the order date down here. If we right click on the order date, we can say group, and let's group it on months and years, and now we've got a summary for each month of the year for this salesperson. And maybe then we want to put the months across the top, and the years, I guess it's all 2007, so we could actually just get rid of the years, drag that up here. You see now it added years up to our list of fields. So that was one way to summarize by years. Let's say we decide we don't want to summarize by years now. Let's go here. Let's go up on here and do group again. Instead of months and years, let's do quarters. Okay, so now it's summarized the data by quarter. Maybe we want the quarters over here above the salesperson. Let's get rid of years again. Just all kinds of different things that you can do just by dragging some fields around. Let's say that we don't only want the sum of the extended price, but we want to know how many of each item, or what quantity of item they sold also. So let's turn that into a number without decimals. We're not going to have a partial quantity, a half of an item. So in quarter one, Janet sold 3,121 items for a total of $97,120.94. We can add calculated fields. So up here on the options tab, let's see, I gotta remember how to do this. Here it is right here, fields, items, and sets. We can say, give me a calculated field. I want to know, let's take the, let's call this field the average. And we'll take the extended price. Oops, I added company name by mistake. Equals extended price divided by the quantity. Okay, and now we've got an average for each salesperson, an average per item. We could count the number of orders and do an average by orders. We could do all kinds of different things. So hopefully this gives you some idea of how you can use pivot tables to summarize a large amount of data. Now if you've only got 10 rows, a pivot table might be overkill. But if you've got 2,000 rows, this can be pretty powerful. I should also mention that in addition to a pivot table, you can do a pivot chart. So if you choose the arrow at the bottom of pivot table and choose pivot chart instead, it works the same way. I don't know why our other fields aren't showing up. Oh, we only had extended price chosen. So let me delete that chart. Okay. Can you tell I'm working without a script? So let's select everything again here, and we will do insert pivot chart. Okay, and then again we'll put the extended price here on the values. So it just gives us one value. If we want to do it by salesperson, now we can see it by salesperson. All of the same things that we were able to do before, and if we want, we can change it to a line chart. All the stuff that we could present in tabular format, we can also present as a chart. And if you want to make this chart its own tab, you can select it and move it to its own sheet and make the chart its own tab. And then as long as you're back over here manipulating things, like let's say we don't want the salesperson now, we want the product name. And now if we go look at the chart, it'll put the product name here instead of the salesperson. And so either whichever sheet we're on, either making the pivot table here or the pivot chart that is linked to that table, they both will be impacted. And so we can do things like, let's add the order date as a report filter. You'll see that it adds it up here. Okay, and we can do, I only want to see quarter two's data, and now it's filtered to quarter two, and so is the chart. It's only showing us quarter two, but we can do the same thing up here. Switch it to quarter three, things like that. So pivot table is useful for summarizing large amounts of data relatively easily, although they tend to scare people away. People hear the word pivot table and they get kind of freaked out, and sometimes it's hard to find an application for them. But once you find an application for it the first time, you'll find all kinds of applications for pivot tables going forward.